All right, the UN Security Council is expected to convene an emergency meeting today to discuss Israel's strikes on Hamas leaders in Qatar. The major escalation has prompted condemnation from around the world as well as a rare rebuke from President Trump. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb has more from the Qatari capital of Doha.
Well, Israeli leaders are defending the strikes here on the Qatari capital, even after President Trump said he's not happy about it, saying, and I'm quoting here, it advances neither Israel nor America's goals. Hamas, meanwhile, has denied any of its top negotiators were among the 6 who were killed in that strike. That strike that happened in broad daylight in what's known as the diplomatic quarter here in Doha. It's an area of a lot of embassies, some schools, and private residences. So as you can imagine, people reacted with fear and terror after those strikes, which were carried out, from what we understand, by a series of Israeli jets. Whatever the case, Israel, as we've been saying, is defiant, but this has really made things complicated for the Trump administration, which is very close allies of Qatar. We have to remember, this is a country which hosts the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. It's also where Central Command is as well. And so for Qatar to be targeted by Israel like this is, of course, very alarming, and Qatar demanding answers. Now, Qatar, as we've been saying, has a long history of being considered neutral territory for complicated diplomatic negotiations, including hosting talks between the Afghan Taliban and the previous Trump administration. And given the White House was alerted in advance of the Doha attack by Israel, Qatari leaders are clearly asking why they weren't informed ahead of time. Back to you.
All right, Imtiaz, thank you very much. I want to bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Edward Djerejian. He's also a senior fellow at the Harvard Belfer Center. Thanks for joining us, sir. So let me ask you, does this attack end any hope of a ceasefire deal? And what would happen? I mean, I'm very concerned about the hostages, the 48 hostages, both dead and alive, that Hamas still has in its grip. What does it mean for them?
Well, I think both are in jeopardy, Vlad. The targeting of the Hamas leadership in Qatar, at the same time, the Trump administration has floated a comprehensive ceasefire deal in which Qatar, as a key mediator, has been in these ceasefire talks, raises serious questions about Israel's intent on actually reaching an agreement at this time. If the attacks in Qatar were conceived as a pressure tactic on Hamas to modify its position in the ceasefire talks, and the U.S. Agreed to this with Israel, I think that approach could well backfire. The Qataris have already made some very strong statements against Israel. They've drawn the red line, as have other Arab states in the Gulf, that the Abraham Accords could very well be in jeopardy. Not only because of this action that Israel took in Doha, but also what the Israeli settlers are doing in the West Bank, and some key Israeli ministers talking about annexation of the West Bank. So the situation has really gone backwards. We're in a much more perilous state of affairs now.
Wow. So that's an interesting point of analysis, which is not only are we in really uncharted waters when it comes to those remaining hostages and to perhaps ending the war in Gaza, but you suggest that perhaps other Gulf state leaders say that this is a step too far and start to think their alliances, both with Israel and with the United States. And also, Mr. Ambassador, this is sort of embarrassing for the White House, is it not, given that the attack happened, how it unfolded? I know the president gave Hamas an ultimatum to bring them to the table to negotiate that deal, but the president has indicated that he's not happy with Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is pretty rare because, generally speaking, both leaders are in lockstep.
Well, I think the president has realized that Netanyahu has just gone too far. This is not the first time that Netanyahu has, in a way, undercut American initiatives in the Middle East. You'll remember on the Iran nuclear deal, the Trump administration was negotiating with the Iranians on the nuclear deal when Israel unilaterally conducted airstrikes against Iranian nuclear targets, which then led to the United States and the president agreeing to the so-called 12-day war, where American military aircraft bombed nuclear sites. It's the same syndrome here. You have Netanyahu acting unilaterally. he has weaponized Israeli diplomacy on all fronts. He isn't opting for diplomacy. He's opting for military actions to, as much as possible, decapitate the so-called axis of resistance. These are Israeli strikes in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, throughout the region, and now in Qatar. And what really bothers me as a former American diplomat is that the United States national security interests in the Middle East include our relationship with Qatar and our hosting, as your commentator noted, the largest base we have in the Gulf, in Udeid Air Force Base, and the headquarters of CENTCOM, which is responsible for U.S. national military operations throughout the Middle East. I asked the question, if Israel is such a close ally, why did it not coordinate fully with the United States when it's obviously not in the U.S. national security interest to have to put Qatar in this situation?
So Ambassador Djerejian, do you believe, last question to you, sir, these questions are so important and we really don't have answers to them. We can analyze the situation, but until the Israelis, until Prime Minister Netanyahu explains exactly what the attempt was and why, for example, as you say, CENTCOM, as it appears to be, was not notified, or they did not work in conjunction with CENTCOM or with the President of the United States, do you think we'll ever get those answers?
I don't think so. There's a lot of incoherence in the policies being conducted now. At the end of the day, you know, we could have had these ceasefire talks months ago in order to release the Israeli hostages, have Palestinian prisoner exchanges, and then have a ceasefire that is durable, and then start building Gaza back up. But the basic issue here is that there's no coherent day after Gaza plan. It's all based on tactical considerations and military operations.
Really fascinating insight from somebody who knows a lot more about it than I do.